So good evening and assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Shanza Khan. I am the founder and CEO of Ion Ivy. I am privileged and honored to have with me today Lloyd Nimetz, who is a graduate of Williams, where he did his bachelor in #1 liberal arts institution in the USA, for those of you who don't know, and who's also a graduate with an MBA from Stanford. So we are privileged to have him. Lloyd is the founder and CEO of Spike Lab. The reason we invited Lloyd today is because as a college counselor and as a firm which guides students towards getting acceptances into top universities, we always tell students that while grades are essential and extremely important in the process, it is frankly the very first step in the journey. Those of you who are planning to apply to the US know that you need to have at least 10 extracurricular activities. That is what the Common App requires you to showcase, as well as 5 academic awards. And it should not be just any activity. Ideally, it should be a passion project, or is Lloyd going to talk a little bit more about, a spike that you can showcase to university admission officers about your area of interest. Lloyd is a 7-time serial entrepreneur and investor. Shark Tank guys, think Mark Cuban. And as a Stanford alum, Lloyd brings a wealth of experience and insight into the world of entrepreneurship. Spike Lab coaches are not only entrepreneurs, but also experts at teaching entrepreneurship. The team has 21 coaches across different fields, from engineering, theater, finance, social impact, and more. Before I hand over the mic to Lloyd, please, guys, feel free to put your questions in the chat box. We will be having a dedicated 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any and all of the questions you may have. With that, over to you, Lloyd.
Thank you so much for that really kind introduction and for inviting me today. It's great to talk to all of you here today and listening maybe on a recording. There's some messages that they can't hear me. Can you hear me? Is everyone okay? I'm seeing some messages, but maybe the tech team can sort that out. Just stop me, Ion Ivy team, if you can't hear me. I am in the countryside in South America on a spring break with my family, so hopefully the internet will keep up. Normally I'm based in the United States, in New York City. So I run Spike Lab. Our job is to work exclusively with teenagers who are on the path to college in the United States, sometimes in other places like England, but usually United States. And they want to work with us in order to help identify, often, not always, and to build out a spike, which, as you just heard, is a passion project. It does not need to be a business. We usually get that question. It can be all sorts of things. The key is for you to identify something that you deeply care about, or that you might deeply care about soon if you throw yourself into it, because a lot of people are trying to figure that out. What they are passionate about, and launch something that really will have an impact in the world that people need, and isn't just a project for you to learn. And that's hard, very hard for adults, and that's what we do. But I want to start with a little bit of why you should do this, and it actually starts with why I started this program. I started Spike Lab almost 10 years ago. Because it hit me. It hit me in my experience in my life that no one told me that I could pursue my passions and build out projects, and that it would help me actually get into college and get into different institutions. I was very happy to get into Williams, but my top choice was actually Stanford back then. And I had a chip on my shoulder until I got into Stanford Business School. And I wish someone had told me that I could have pursued some of my passions more in high school. And so I built Spike Lab to communicate that you can. And the reason I know is because after college, I went actually down to Argentina, which is why I'm here, because I love this country. And I started a nonprofit. There was a big crisis, economic crisis, and I started a nonprofit to help with that crisis. I won't bore you with all the details, but it was pretty successful. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars at the time, and later millions, to help with issues of hunger and education and transparency, corruption. And I love the work. I actually didn't do it at all to get into business school. But when I did end up applying to business school a few years later, I got in everywhere. My test scores were the same. And my grades in college were the same as my grades in high school. Everything seemed the same, except I had done this project. That was pretty cool. And Harvard, Stanford, where everyone I applied to, I got in. And it was a big surprise to me that there was this huge difference. But then when I thought about it, it kind of made sense, because these colleges, what they're trying to do is they're not just trying to get the smartest students in. They're trying to build a class that teaches each other. They're trying to build a campus that is going to be a special place to live for 4 years. And it's special because you have a lot of interesting people who bring a lot of their own passions and excitement into the cafeteria, into the classroom, into the dorm rooms. And so they see themselves as trying to find people who are going to bring energy and excitement. And the best way for them to know if you really are someone like that is to see that you're doing it yourself already in high school. And so that's why these passion projects are so important for getting into college, is because they really want that. They're trying to build a special campus, and they want these people, you, to have energy and excitement, but they want it to be authentic, not forced. And it's hard to know, obviously, but it's also, not worth faking it if you can do it for real, because it's so much more fun that way and more interesting. And so at Spike Lab, our job is to work with students, if they already have identified an area of passion, to find a really good project where they can manifest that passion into a project that is feasible, because you're busy, you have grades, you have classes, and you don't have all the time in the world, but it's going to be hard to put something out there into the world, build it, get people to use it. And so you want to find a project that's feasible and then launch it. And so doing that all by yourself is almost impossible, in my opinion. It's almost like trying to be a professional athlete as a high schooler, which there are many. I think one just won the US Tennis Open 2 years ago. So there are a lot of high schoolers who are professional athletes, right? Or end up getting recruited by colleges for their sports. And they have their own coaches. They have support. So that's our role, is to work one-on-one with high schoolers that are very serious about doing something real in the world, to do a passion project, or what we call a spike. Now, we call it spike. I just want to explain the word because it helps explain sort of the context with college. Colleges more and more want spiky students, not well-rounded students. And it's a little controversial, but it helps sort of a simple way to think about it. It's important to be well-rounded, right? In the sense that a lot of people only focus on grades. And if you only focus on grades, you end up having a little bit of a too one-dimensional profile for college applications, because there are a lot of smart people out there. So you want to be smart, but also have this other dimension to your profile. And that's the traditional idea of well-roundedness. It's why extracurriculars are so important. But now it's gone even farther because it's so competitive. And you could argue that's, good, or there's a lot of arguments around whether this is healthy, but it's just the way it is. And so the next dimension is to go spiky, is to go deeper. Spiky means go deeper into one area of passion. So a lot of people are doing clubs, Model United Nations, or a debate club, or sports. But if you stay at the superficial level, it doesn't help you stand out. It's not that it's not that impressive to the very, very top colleges, which, is where most people we work with are focused. So you want to show that you've gone deeper. And that's what we mean by spiky. And a spike is a project that demonstrates that you've gone deeper. It's proof. You don't have to just say, oh, I'm very excited about this. You can show with evidence that you are through the actions that you've done. And so that's what a passion project or a spike is trying to do when it comes down to the application. You're showing, it's all on paper. Most first reads, when this is an interesting fact, when colleges are reading applications, the first read is usually about 8.5 minutes, I've heard. Different studies have said different, but it's very short. They'll read through that very quickly. You spent months and months on it, and they read through it very quickly, and you need something to jump out at them. And grades are always important. These are academic institutions. Grades are always going to be important, but it doesn't stop there. You want something else that, like I said, makes them want you in their club, in their community. That's how they think about it. I also talk about the airplane test. If you were to sit next to someone on the airplane for a long ride from Pakistan to the United States, let's say, and you had to talk to them that whole time, would you enjoy that? Would you learn from that? Would you grow from that? Would you come away thinking, oh, this student is really interesting. I want to, my kids to hang out with him or her, or I want to hang out with him or her, right? Like that's the type of people that they want to bring in, and by doing interesting things. So anyway, that's kind of our philosophy. I hope that's helpful. And if you have further questions on the philosophy and sort of the answer to why, please ask questions. There'll be time. I want to get into some stories about. I'll explain a little how our program works later, but just some stories of students who've done spikes and what it looks like, because I find that's much more interesting. So I'll start with one of my favorites, who I'm still in touch with. She's a remarkable young woman. Also ended up going to Stanford. So when I visit my old place, which I go a lot, I see her and she catches me up on things. But what she did was, and I'll give you a little bit of the longer story so you have a sense of how this happens. Because sometimes you hear the end story and it's like, oh my God, I can't do that. But it's actually, everyone starts from a similar place of being a little nervous, being a little scared, not knowing what to do, not having a passion, not knowing if you have enough time. Those are all normal places to start. And as long as you're committed and you want to do this and you carve out enough time, you can. But anyway, so she started during COVID, and she couldn't even, go out. She couldn't go to her school. She was doing everything from home. It's a very hard time to start something, but she did anyway. And she started because she loved animals. She started by just walking dogs around her neighborhood and just making some money from that. And that was more of a project than her actual spike project. It was sort of a thing to get out there and learn how to actually like sell and have a service and make some money. And so we helped her kind of get that going. And she loved dogs and she was sort of looking for a bigger idea within that. And she thought it would be around animals. But then she was also interested in languages and was learning American Sign Language. She wasn't deaf or hard of hearing, but she had family members who were, and she really wanted to be able to communicate with them. And so she was trying to learn ASL, American Sign Language. And she wanted to learn it the way she learned Spanish, which was another language she learned by watching TV shows online, on like TV or on Netflix. And she couldn't. There was no, picture within a picture of an interpreter that went along with the, the movie or the show. And so she started to explore that. I'm going to simplify the process of finding the need and understanding if there's really an opportunity. But she, by talking to the deaf community, realized this is a huge pain point. Parents would stand for hours next to their computer doing sign next to the computer so their kids could watch movies like Moana, Frozen, whatever, pick your favorite movie. And there was a huge injustice she felt and a huge need, and she wanted to do something about it. And so she picked that and she developed a plugin to the browser. She wasn't technically very strong, but she was able to design the right thing and motivate some other technology people, some developers, to help her. And they built a very simple plugin that worked. And for 3 movies, and she got some interpreters, like professional sign to do, and they're actually called actors. They're interpreter actors, And anyway, long story short, she built this and it worked. And people got excited within the deaf community and started to share it with just a few movies on Netflix. Anyway, fast forward, it took off, and there are now hundreds of thousands of deaf kids using this. And when you're a kid, it's harder to read the subtitles. And so subtitles are not sufficient. So it's usually the kids who need this. And it's taken off, and it's really just a wonderful thing. She raised $1 million. She was named one of the Forbes 30 under 30, 30 people under 30 for being an entrepreneur. And she was the only one under 20 in that group. And she ended up taking a year off before going to Stanford. Now she's there and continuing to do it while in college. And it's just a remarkable sort of thing. Now, not every student needs to that. Like that's a pretty amazing accomplishment. But that's a kind of a cool story. I'll give you another one that's more sort of business oriented. And he also liked animals, but he ended up realizing during COVID that the fastest growing pet category in the United States during COVID was chickens, backyard chickens. People were getting chickens, and they have these chicken coops, they're called, where they keep their chickens. And so he realized through talking to people, because he also had chickens, that the biggest pain was cleaning the poop in those chicken coops. And he called the tagline, "We'll scoop the poop in your coop." And and he built a service business, which was not hard to get going. He had a couple people in his neighborhood, in his sort of area. He lived in the suburbs, obviously not in a city. And he was able to build a business that was making a few $1,000s in profit a month. And then he expanded it to about $10,000-15,000 in profit every month. And he was managing a team of other high schoolers who would go out on weekends and clean up these chicken coops. He had a business. He ran the books, accounting, and, legally incorporated. And he learned, a little bit of all these things. And before he went to college, he sold it to a local like lawn maintenance company, one of those companies that mows the lawns and takes care of your gardens, because it was an extra source of revenue for them. And so he made some good money on that. He had a really good experience, and prepared himself better for a life in business, which is what he was excited about. And he got into Dartmouth, and it was a big part of his application was talking about how he's willing to get literally dirty, and build something real. So that's another example. I love these examples. I'm sorry if you want me to talk about other time. I'm going to give you one more, maybe two, because I want to give an arts example. So, and this is arts and sort of humanities. So we had a student who was really interested in cosplay. Now, I'm not sure if everyone knows what cosplay is. I did not actually. I'm embarrassed to say. Well, not embarrassed. It's sort of a micro fandom. So cosplay is big in East Asia. She was living in Taiwan, and it's basically where you dress up. Cosplay comes from costume. So you dress up, the makeup, the dress in your favorite characters. It's usually like anime characters, but it can be other characters. And and so she liked this. She went to these parties, these conferences, and she was really good at it. They take it very seriously. But as coaches, we were like, well, we don't know if that's really gonna be a great spike for college. Um, and but it ended up being in the root of that was something really, really great because she loved to perform, she loved makeup and costume. And so she was also interested in photography, and she was also the daughter of a single mom. And I'm sort of looking at this because it was important in working with us to help to realize that it's not just what you're interested in, but also who you are that matters. And part of who she was, and she wasn't like telling this to the world, she didn't like think she cared that much, but it was true to her that part of her identity was to be a child of a single mom that had a big impact on who she is. And she never thought about that as important to colleges, but or to her like building a project like a spike. But fast forward, she ended up developing a project where she would go out and interview other children of single parents and from alternative parenting households. And it's actually a whole intellectual area. It's an area of academics, just a lot of studies in anthropology and sociology. And she didn't realize that. She hadn't really thought about that. And it fascinated her. And so she ended up becoming sort of an anthropologist, and interviewing people and learning how to do this sort of field research. And she loved it. And she built up these interviews. She ended up following some of the intellectual academic research that was happening. She ended up talking to one of the great centers doing this work in England, just on Zoom, and sort of helping out one of the professors there a little bit. And then she developed an art project where she took these people she interviewed and she did self-portraiture. So she ended up sort of using her makeup skills, and she took photos of herself acting the sort of essence of these people she interviewed. And so she did a portraiture photography exhibit, and she showed it throughout her city. She did these Airbnb sort of pop-ups, or any place she could. She did these pop-up exhibitions. She didn't wait for a gallery. Like some people wait a year to let a gallery show her work. She didn't wait. She hustled. She did this. She told the press about it. She got some articles. There was a lot of buzz around this because people weren't really talking about alternative parenting households. And her photography was quite good. Not amazing, but it was good. And there was an intellectual angle. And it was just a wonderful project. She got in the news. Her friends were like, is that you? Were you doing that? And and she was like, yeah. And she was really proud. She learned a ton. And she was probably the only person to apply to colleges with a project like that. It was very unique and very special. And she ended up getting in to kind of almost every college. She got into Dartmouth, which is Ivy League. She ended up going to Western, which is, a really wonderful college in Chicago. And her high school counselor had actually suggested she not apply to those schools because her grades weren't normally, good enough. So it just, and I hear that over and over again, by the way. I'm not just cherry picking things here. Like colleges are willing for you to have lower grades, or you can get into a higher college basically with whatever grades you have if you're bringing something else to the table and you're sort of exciting to the college. So that's sort of my message here. I see I have a little more time. I kind of want to open up the question, but let me say a little bit about my program and how it works. So our program is one-on-one coaching. Our students are matched with a coach like me. I'm one of the coaches, but I don't take on as many students because I have to run things and I have to support all the other coaches. So if you work with us, you will get me as a second coach. We call it the dean of coaches. Um, and the way it works is we match you with a coach who we think you're going to really get along with because that relationship is super important. You really have to um, be close with the coach and feel a sense of trust because you have this identity work I'm talking about is hard and it's key to a good project is not just thinking, oh, I'm interested in math. Let's do something related to math. No, it has to get to the core of who you are. And who you are has to do with your identities. And we all have lots of identities and they're always changing in terms of strength, like which are your strong identities, your weak identities. But the most powerful ones tend to be what we call under the water line. If you use an iceberg metaphor, there's you, it's very cliched, but you are an iceberg. And under the water is most of who you are. And under the water here means the part that you don't really show to the world, right? So we're comfortable showing certain sides of who we are to the world. But a lot of the things we aren't, especially the things that maybe we're a little ashamed of, that have been challenges in our life. Um, and those things are vulnerable to talk about. They're hard to talk about. But those are very powerful. So in the example that I just gave, it was not easy for her to talk about being the child of a single mom and the impact that had on her. Not impossible. It's not all the way at the bottom of the iceberg. But it was definitely under the waterline, not easy to talk about. And you want to have a coach who you can talk about those things with because those are important things to surface in your application because those are authentic. And when people read your application, you want things to come across that show that you're real, that you are bringing your full self, and that the person got to know you a little bit. So that's important in the application, and therefore it's important in these projects because the project speaks for who you are. People are going to not just be impressed by what you do, but they want to know why you did it. And if it's not tied to you, it's not as compelling an answer. And so having an answer to why you're doing these projects is very, very important. And you want a coach who can help you bring the why, bring you into your project. It's a really, really important part of the way we work and I really encourage you, if you're going to take this on, to not forget that piece. Because a lot of people think, oh, I got a kind of project that's really cool. It's going to look good. And it's going to be like, I'm going to look so great when I do this. And yes, that's good. Impressiveness matters, but you want the why because people will be impressed by that and they'll feel like it's authentic. You also want that because it becomes more meaningful for you. Almost by definition, if something is personal to you, it's tied to who you are in some way. And when it's personal, it's more meaningful. And you want to do things that are meaningful to you. You're more likely to succeed. In general, you're more likely to be motivated when things get hard, and they will. So these are important parts of the project. So back to how we work. We match you with a coach, and there's some meetings before you commit to make sure it's a really good fit. And then you stay with that coach and meet with them weekly. We start with 12 weeks, which is about 3 to 4 months. And then you renew for every month for however long you need that support. We think of our coaching a little bit like training wheels on a bicycle. Like the goal is to get rid of us. We're the support, but we want you to build the skills to be able to do it yourself. We aren't the project, right? Like the project is its own thing, and we're there to support. You're driving the show. You're doing the project. We're there to support. When you don't need the support, we step away, and you decide when that is. And the idea is for you to build different supports, advisors who have domain expertise in exactly the thing you're doing. Um, or obviously parents can play an important role, or your college advisor or consultant if you're working with one, or a teacher. So you want to build that support system. You might have some people on your team after you start something. A lot of our students will end up, pulling in team members. And so at some point you feel confident, you know how to run things, you know how to build a plan and execute on it. A lot of these executive functioning skills are hard for adults, and definitely for young people. You have to plan, you have to have a calendar, you have to know how to execute on a plan. So these are very real world skills that you're going to use for the rest of your life and are very, very important. And so we want to build up those skills, build up your confidence in leading, and then you sort of go off on your own. And so weekly, meet for 90 minutes on Zoom. It's very convenient. You don't have to go anywhere. Um, and then there's a process. We have a lot of exercises. We call it a modular curriculum, which basically means that the coaches have a lot of different pieces that they can pull together to make sure you move fast with the right exercises. In the beginning, it's focused on discovery, self-discovery. So who am I? What are my identities? The stuff we were talking about earlier. We go pretty quickly on that because we want to get you to the idea. The next step is to identify a spike project. We call it identification stage. That's based on who you are, but also will really have impact in the world. And then from there, we validate the idea by doing a pilot or a small little project to test that idea. So you want to take risk out of the project as much as possible, because building something in the real world is risky. It might not work. Most entrepreneurs fail. And so we want to do everything we can to make it as likely to succeed in this as possible. And so there's this stage of de-risking or validating. We've pulled from best practice, the way Stanford Business School and Harvard Business School and all these places teach entrepreneurship is something called customer development or lean entrepreneurship. And there's also called design thinking. You might have heard of these practices. So we're basically taking business school level courses and ways entrepreneurs start things, and we've incorporated it into our process. And so you're actually learning how the best practice to start things, which means it's kind of like the scientific method, if you've learned that in school, where you have a hypothesis and you test it. You have a hypothesis around an idea that will work and the business model and the plan, and then you test that and you try to make sure that it actually makes sense. Because you're not going to get it all right the first time. And then you make pivots and tweaks, and then it starts to have what's called product market fit, an idea that's working. And then the next stage is to grow that idea, and eventually scale it, if you can. So those are the stages, and we help students go through those stages. One of the things I love to share is brainstorming. Like, it's really important if you're going to do this on your own, which is fine. You don't have to work with us. But if you're going to do something like this, come up with lots of ideas. There's this idea of divergent thinking. You want to turn off that analytical part of your brain that you're developing in school, and our schools prioritize, which is like, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with that? And I have to have the perfect idea. Turn that off for a second and think about all the ideas you can, even the crazy, terrible ones. That's divergent thinking, opening thinking, right? And then after that, turn on the analytical part of your brain and converge. If you do that well, you'll get hundreds of ideas. Every one of our students has hundreds of ideas when they go through our process. And then they'll converge on the best ones. And we have not done our job if you don't have at least 2 ideas you're very excited to work on. It should feel like torture to pick the idea because you're giving up an idea, right? It's like, I don't know, an analogy, but like you should feel that because it forces you to pick really the best idea because you're choosing from multiple very good ideas. And what do you want to look for? You want to look for something that you care about, right? That is very personal to you. And there's that connection to who you are. which is hard. You also want to look that it actually is needed. People need this thing in the world. You also want it to be feasible, right? Something that you can actually do and not take a long time to get off the ground. Technical projects are not great ones. Unfortunately, most students don't have the skills to build an app, or it costs a lot of money, or even if it doesn't, it takes a long time to get off the ground. And by the time you know if it works or not, a year has passed, or if you're really lucky, 6 months, and that becomes very risky. We do, as you heard, we do technical spikes, but we are very careful about them, and you want to be careful about anything that's going to take a while to get off the ground. The other thing is you want it to be relatively unique. A lot of we don't like podcasts. We don't like content spikes, because so many people are doing content-oriented spikes. Oh, I love, horticulture. I want to do a podcast on horticulture to sort of talk with the experts. That's, pretty common to go out there and do a content-oriented spike. Some unique models of content spikes are very interesting, but you want to be discerning around the uniqueness of what you do. And also content spikes are kind of tricky because they're exciting at first, but then you realize, oh gosh, I have to break through the noise and compete with Mr. Beast and all the other content out there in the world. Mr. Beast is the top YouTuber in the United States, so apologies for a US reference, but you probably know him. And so you realize, oh my God, this is a marketing spike. This is a spike where I have to actually be a great marketer. And a lot of people don't want that. And so you want to be careful about the things you pick. You want them to be unique, feasible, tied to who you are. And yeah, that's I guess that's a little bit about our program. I'm happy to answer more questions, but I don't want to bore you with the details. Our coaches are all experienced entrepreneurs. They have built things, not always businesses. A lot of them are social entrepreneurs, meaning they've built nonprofits or done campaigning, advocacy, but the ability to build things in the world from zero to real is a requirement, plus a passion for working with teenagers. And they've all gone to top US colleges, so they all know this context of applying colleges. So I'll stop there, leave 20 plus minutes for questions, and excited to get some. I haven't been looking at the chat because it's too distracting. So let me know what questions to take.
So thank you so much for that, Lloyd. It was extremely informative. I have plenty of questions, but since our audience has put so much in the chat box, let me begin with those just to get it started. I have a parent, and this is a question I get many times, so I'll begin with this one. In your experience, have students been able to manage entrepreneurship, studies, and other activities, or does it take up most of their time?
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's an important one, and it ties into something I'm passionate about, which is mental health for teenagers, being, not overwhelming yourself and becoming too stressed because you're just too overwhelmed, which is related to overscheduling. The quick answer is yes. I mean, we've done this for 8 years. Students can handle it all. Our students have, been doing all the A levels or all, the UK system, or, all the AP classes, which is, the US system, or the IB top, sort of rigorous academic course loads, and doing spikes. Now, you can't do everything. So sometimes you do have to cut, and that is a part of the reality. I'm a big believer in looking, like we call it a time audit, but really it's a strategic audit of your life and saying, okay, what's most important to me? Rank order it. What's most important to colleges? Rank order it in your life, right? Like what are the most important things that you're doing? So you're doing these classes in school, you're doing extracurricular things, you're doing sport things, maybe you might do a spike. Your family, like don't forget about all the other stuff in your life. Religion, like these things. And then what are the most important things to you, to colleges? What are they looking for in your life? So take that same list of things in your life. How would the college look at that? And that just gives you perspective. It doesn't mean you should change your life to optimize only for college. That you should not do that. You should stick to who you are, but be aware of the game, the system, right? Like you should be aware and be smart. And then think about, well, where can I make adjustments? And you want to also put a time next to those, right? Like how much time are you spending per week? And it's not a perfect science, but it starts to let you think more strategically about what to cut. I have a student I talked to yesterday who been playing volleyball like really a lot, like every day, every weekend for years. And she's going to be a rising junior, so 11th grader. And she realized that like she's just not going to get recruited for volleyball in college. And she likes it a lot, but she kind of she realizes it's not that strategic, and she's also passionate about doing other stuff. And so she's gonna take the leap and like cut. It's hard because it's like she's been doing this. She has teammates. She was gonna be probably a co-captain. Like so very successful, but she's not gonna get recruited. Doesn't weigh that much on your colleges don't care that much if you're not getting recruited for their team. So um all this time for, not going to help college. And she feels like she got a lot out of it already. And she wants to go off and do something new. Actually, it's a cool one. Her spike, it's just starting, but she's going to become a cinema therapist, which is a type of therapist that helps people manage their media consumption to optimize their mental health. So basically, it's like a nutritionist might help you like decide what your diets are for food to help your body. She's doing this to help teenagers have better mental health through thinking more strategically about what they watch. And it's like a very small field, but she discovered it and she's really interested in psychology. So she's excited about that. And she wants to become an expert. And I don't know, we'll see what happens. But it's a risk. My point is it's very risky. I'm sorry for a long answer, but this is the hardest part of doing a spike, is actually carving out the time, making that leap, and it's risky. It is risky. I want to recognize you don't know if it's going to be successful. You don't know what your project's going to be. And if you have to cut something to make time for something risky, it's hard. And a lot of people don't do it. We do everything we can to reduce the risk, and our success rates are really, really high. But when people do it on their own, it is hard because, when the going gets tough, it falls apart, or a student just can't organize themselves on their own. And so that's why it's usually not successful. It's just because it's easy to sort of fall off the path and not keep going without support. But you don't have to be like a genius to do these things. You just have to be organized, committed, and keep going for an extended period of time. But anyway, so yeah, you have to carve out time. It's not the answer is very simple. Make sure you have time. What kind of time is usually a question I get. In the beginning, you probably need 4 to 5 hours a week to dedicate to identifying an idea and a project. And so with us, for example, the students are spending about an hour and a half in a session, and they're spending about 3 to 4 hours outside of the session to really figure out what to do. When they're building the project, it starts to increase in time, but it really depends on the project. And you can kind of control this part of the work is to design a project that is going to actually work within the constraints of how much time you have. So some projects you just can't, they're not feasible, like I said earlier, if they require more time than you have available. Now, most projects do, though, take a lot of time. So the quick way to understand this is it's like a top extracurricular. The type of time you'd spend on a sport or a musical instrument, if you're serious, is about the same amount of time you're going to spend on a Spike project.
It's the equivalent of debating in Pakistan. That's the analogy I would use here. Munning and debating is equivalent of usually the musical instrument over here. So, once again, you have to make that determination. How good are you? Thank you for that answer, Lloyd. I have a lot more questions. Abdul Wahab is asking, how do you approach branding and marketing for your business?
For the Spike, sorry, my
I
business
think
or
so.
the
I think it's for a Spike business. How would you approach branding and marketing for it? Do you have like a
yes.
general template or that you encourage students, or is it specified to what they're doing? I think he just wants greater insight on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the marketing side of it is very important. You want whatever project you're doing, you want it to have, first of all, you want it to have like visual artifacts. Not just for you want the business to be successful, right? So the marketing helps your business or venture be successful. But you also want eventually colleges to have something to look at, to know it's real. And you want to leave a footprint. And so it serves both purposes. I don't know if I could talk for hours about this. It's a very important part. Like all projects need to market. You need to have a brand. You need to communicate and message. You need to get the word out. Every project's different, so there's no anyone says there's a formula is lying. Every project needs to adjust its marketing strategy. The basics are you need a name, you need a brand, like a logo, and you need a website, you need a flyer or something to send people. You need usually some social media accounts. Not everyone needs that. And that's sort of like the basics of a marketing footprint. And our key is to move fast, right? There's this phrase in Silicon Valley, move fast and break things. Like don't be afraid to like put things out there that break. Like don't be a perfectionist. And it's the same thing here. Like put things out there, move fast. A lot of people make the mistake of like, oh, I have an idea, let's build a website. That's like the worst thing to do because it usually takes a long time, especially if it's a big website. What you want to do is create a flyer. Go on to Canva, which is one of the most popular online sort of free tools to build flyers. Literally, you can do it in 30 minutes. You just go on there, build a flyer. What's your core message? That's the essence of a website for most of these projects is to communicate what you do to your audience. And so start with a flyer, do it really fast. Don't get too fancy. Send that to a couple of people who should be your market, your early adopters, who you're serving, or your audience, if it's more content driven or art, and get feedback. See what they think. I have a student who's starting a athlete mentoring Spike. So student athlete. So for young students who are like in our system, like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, they're just starting to get into a sport like soccer or gymnastics or tennis, and they're being matched with a high school mentor in order to get that sort of support from a student like you, but who's getting recruited by colleges and have that sort of support in their life. And she was ready, like she was like, okay, it's good. She was creating her go-to-market plans or her plan to launch. And in her pre-work, your work between sessions, she had developed a plan, and the website was like 4 to 5 weeks long to build the website. And that was the first thing in her plan. And I was like, when I saw that, because I'm coaching her, I said, no, we're gonna build a flyer in like 1 week or less. It should take you about an hour. and she did that. And what happens is she sharpened her message. She got feedback on it, and she actually gave it to two kids and their parents, and she closed her first two students. So she got the flyer and got her first two students in a week. She didn't need a website to get that going. So she had something real going within the week, and she just needed a flyer. So my point is, you want to start small, get things off the ground, and then it can get big. You can have a complex website. You can do all kinds of things. But anyway, thanks for letting
Thank you.
me go on and on.
Yeah,
Next
no,
question.
thank you for that, Lloyd. I have Emin Mushtaba asking, how do we apply for the program, and does Spike Lab give financial aid scholarships? We will be putting your contact information, after this recording as well, and sending it to everyone who's registered, as well as on our website. But Lloyd, if you can answer, does Spike Lab give financial aid and scholarships?
Um, Fun to enable bigger financial aid, but we haven't been able to do that yet.
I have
Yes. And
sorry, please go ahead.
no, I think you answered the other part of the question. I was like, you just reach out to the ION-IB team if you're interested in doing it.
Yeah, I have another student asking, is it possible for Pakistani students to join the Spike Lab? And I can say yes, and that's why we have Lloyd with us today. They work all over the world, but this is the first time we are introducing them to Pakistan as well. I have an interesting question from Rafe Ahmed, who's saying, he's planning to pursue accounting, and do you think it would help someone like him to engage in a project like Spike Coaching? And he's in O levels, just to clarify.
Sorry, I missed. He's in where? O level?
He's doing his O levels, so he's in the equivalent of the 9th, 10th grade. He's early on in high school.
Got it. There's a lot of ways I can answer that. The quick answer is yes. Especially if you're applying to a US, you want to think about it from an admissions perspective, which is not the only way to look at things, but from an admissions perspective, you want to look at the type of institution that you're trying to get into and see, what they are looking for. Some types of programs don't value the stuff we're talking about today, like extracurriculars. Most do to a certain degree, but it's a matter of what degree they care about it. And you want to talk to experts like ION-IB's team about that, and get a sense, because and research it. So it's hard for me to give an answer, but usually, if it's part of a U.S. liberal arts institution that values diversity of thinking and allows you to study different things, then usually this is very valuable. But you want to align your project also with the types of things you're going to be studying. If you know you're going to do accounting, you probably want to do a project that has some alignment with accounting. You don't have to, but especially for certain institutions, you want to. For example, engineering. I'll just expand your question out to engineering, because there's a lot of engineering focused students. Engineering programs in the United States, they really want a lot. They want to see the quantitative side really strong in your application, and so and they value that, and so it's important to show that. Having a spike is still very important. But we usually want there to be sort of a STEM element to the spike, for engineering students. It's the same for other technical fields or very sort of narrow fields like accounting. So hope that answers.
Thanks for that, Lloyd. I have a very important question, I think, which is pertinent to everyone listening. asked by Sayed Mohammad Naqvi, does an online business count? Since most of them are in high school and have tough routines, it's difficult for them to do other field businesses. So what is your opinion about that?
Mm. Um, I, so for me, no business is purely online because you always have to deal with people. Like there's always a human element to anything real. So if you're planning to just like hide behind a computer and just kind of do something, it won't work. It almost never works. There are exceptions out there, but you'd be surprised. Even like the things that you might think are pure online, like marketplaces or businesses or just young people who develop code and contributed to open source, like they're actually talking to the people. Like these open source projects, they're communities of developers. They meet up, they talk, and they debate things, and there's a very human thing happening. Same with these businesses. Like you need a team and you need to talk to partners, and so a lot can be done online remotely. Like you don't have to have be in the field to do things, but you have to be willing to work with people, and that human part of it is I've never seen anyone succeed without that and being sort of committed to that. So that's the part that I think is very important. You don't necessarily have to be in the field in the sense of like cleaning poo, chicken coop poo, and all that stuff. That you don't have to do.
No, I think that's a very honest answer. Maybe not what many of the students online wanted to hear, but I think it's good to have a picture of how reality works. I have a student asking, Lloyd, can you suggest some other kind of projects that high school students work on? I think some of the examples you shared were very niche. And I can almost sense some of the students who've joined us today thinking, oh, I don't think I could come up with that. Whereas, the more typical projects, whether it's tutoring, I would say that's the probably most common thing that Pakistani students end up doing is to be a tutor. Do you think common versus uncommon spike, does that make a difference in college acceptances as well? Or is it the scale of your success?
Hmm. So I'm purposely picking more unique ones because I guess I want to indirectly make the point that uniqueness matters. I've That's part of our philosophy is that from a admissions perspective, I'd rather, in other words, you only have so much time. Like you can't spend 60 hours a week on this project. So the projects are going to can't usually be that big, that fast, right? It's hard to do that. And so you want an idea that is unique. And by being niche, you get more unique. By looking at the intersection of different fields and coming up with creative things, that uniqueness translates to impressiveness. But it doesn't require a lot of work to get that impressiveness. And so it's like we're hacking the system a little bit through creativity. Um, Also, the more narrow you get and the more unique you get, the less competition. It gets very specific. And so that's the reason, the rationale behind this. And it might sound hard to come up with these ideas, but you just have to be willing to sit down and start thinking and bring in some people who help you. Um, and again, it doesn't have to be us. It just, just like get organized and go for it. But the ideas are out there. And so that's why I like uniqueness. I think it works. And you don't have to. We have a lot of people who don't. I'll give you some more typical things that or less unique and sort of maybe crazy niche ideas. We had a student write a book. She loved reading and writing, so she wrote a book. And it was a big project, and there were some unique elements to it. But you know, you sit down and write a book, that's not that crazy. But she did a great job with it. She self-published it on Amazon, and you know, she ended up going to Columbia. You know, we had a student build, you said tutoring, a tutoring business. She built actually a pro bono nonprofit, so she didn't charge, and she did tutoring for inner city kids in New York City, who couldn't afford their own tutoring. And she built up a little team of top high school students to do it, and she did quite well. So, you know, there are a lot of things that aren't, you know, crazy niche, but I do recommend trying to go niche.
That's what spike coaching is all about. You almost got yourself into this one, Lloyd, when you mentioned in your presentation that sometimes even if your grades are not that great, but you have a great spike, universities will kind of overlook that. So I have a student asking, what are the minimum level grades that would be needed where a spike, what have you seen in your experience that a spike can offset that and still land acceptances and scholarships?
Um, so I don't know. I don't want to throw out numbers because it's a little, things change. You do want to be getting good grades. I mean, I think I'm not going to quite answer the question, but maybe, you know, your team can address that one as the experts. I I mean, I have my answer, but you know, basically my philosophy is they're still academic institutions. They still want to make sure you're going to succeed academically at their institution, and so you have to show that is a big percent of what they're looking for, and all the evidence shows that. I recommend you look at some of the stuff coming out of the Supreme Court trial around Harvard. There's a lot of evidence that was forced Harvard to put into the public domain that they actually had to show how they do their admissions. And it's really fascinating. But basically, I mean, I could do a whole hour talk on this, but like, you know, they require high grades. And so, you know, stay focused on that. That is the number one thing.
Yeah, no,
And
as
I
an international student, I think, guys, there's just no compromise on that particularly. We're out of time, Lloyd, so my apologies for interrupting you. I'm just going to throw a couple of quick short more questions your way since we're so lucky to have you. I have a student asking, can I build a spike if I want to study international relations and political science?
Yes, absolutely. We've had lots of those. You just want to like think about how to apply the theory and concepts into practice. Like think about the way to apply them. Yeah.
And then I have another student asking that is it important to make a lot of money to build up a spike, and it's important to be very successful, you know.
Is it important to make money doing a spy? Is that the question? Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like when
So
you make a business, for it to be a success, do you have to show that it's made a lot of money?
no, no. And I'm glad you asked that question. Maybe it can be the last because it could end with the point I want to make, which is you don't have to actually succeed. That's one of the great things about doing a spike now versus after school, like trying to build a company later. Um, in the real world, you have to succeed, or else you know you have no money and you have nothing to survive on. But in this sense, if you don't succeed, you've gone for it. You've tried to prove something in the world. You're showing initiative that is they love. And so if you're not successful, it's okay because you're still proving your drive, your initiative, you're a leader. All those things are what they care about.
Um, Thank you so much, Lloyd, for all those wonderful explanations. I have students reaching out and asking me how they can contact you. Is there an email that you can drop into the chat box, perhaps, for any questions that people can reach out to you directly with? In the meantime, I have another girl asking whether there's an internship program for summer vacations. Spikes, as a volunteer in a Rotary Club, we will have a separate session on which other extracurriculars can help you. But thank you once again so much for joining us today. Very grateful. And Lloyd, thank you for sharing your stories with us. I think, you know, we've had some really important takeaways in terms of why it's important to have a niche idea. The fact that not everything can be done online, you know, it's great for my students to hear that, and the reality of making hard choices in terms of extracurriculars, you know, that's another domain which students, I think, struggle with, that, you know, they think they have to do everything. And guys, you don't. If you are not going to be recruited to play a sport at the varsity level, then, you know, you really need to think, do I want to devote so much time to that sport? Is it a hobby for me? Is it something I enjoy doing? Or is it something which is going to get me in college? I know that these are very difficult issues for students and parents to think about with, but I'm glad that we had Lloyd here as an expert to shed some light on that. So thank you very much again for joining all the way from Argentina, Lloyd. We are most grateful, and we hope to invite you again later on this year to perhaps go in deeper on a particular issue, perhaps marketing and branding, or whatever you know, issue that you would shed light on for our students.
My pleasure. It's been really fun, hopefully helpful. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Please make a note of all the information in the chat box, and we will have it on our website and on the recording as well. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you so much, Lloyd.
Thank you, Chandra.
Have a great morning. Bye.